and let us run with endurance the race that was set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. In college, I worked out one time, I've worked out more than one time, but I worked out one time with a weighted vest in college, and it was the worst thing I've ever done in my entire life, and this is why I've only done this once. Working out is already hard enough, and so imagine adding additional weight to the workout in order to make things worse. In college, we had this really janky weightlifting set in the back of our backyard of our house. I mean, it was not covered, so picture, rain falling on a metal set and then drying off and falling again, and I can't believe I didn't get tetanus and die. I mean, it's really that rough and sketchy. Think like, mobile home type setup. That's pretty much what we were working with in the backyard. But the roommates convinced me, all right, we're going to go in the 90 degree Milledgeville heat and work out in weighted vests. And so, we had strapped pallets that you would use to ship food onto resistance bands and trying to run across the backyard in order to create heavy weight and resistance. Really just terrible, terrible things. But the first thing I'm thinking of when reading this passage is this idea of laying aside every weight, and how quick and how simple and how easy of a reminder it is to me how much more difficult we can make in our everyday activities than when we add additional challenges, additional struggles to that process that's put in place. And so when God is calling us to run this race, what he's doing is actually encouraging us to do very much the opposite, to take off the weighted vest, to take off everything that is in our lives that we add as these additional burdens, the ways in which we make things so much harder for ourselves in the process of pursuing him. It says in this passage that he is the founder and the perfecter, and that he has the joy that is set before him. These are the ideas of what we need to shed ourselves for in order to look towards. We're looking towards this profounder. We're looking towards the perfecter, the one who has already given us the pathway. He's given us the guidance. He's already shown us what a life needs to look like. And here we are keeping on these things, keeping on this comfort and these ideas and these places in our lives that make things so much more challenging. Jonathan Edwards is an American theologian of the past that has this great kind of illustration of the way in which we view this in our lives. To kind of paraphrase, he talks about the idea of justification and sanctification. We've talked about these big churchy words in the past, justification being the moment in which Christ saved us, that single moment where he, above all else, chose to take us out of our sinfulness, out of our flesh, out of the ways in which we were pursuing the world, and brought us into salvation with him. And then we have sanctification, which is this churchy word to talk about this race that we're running, to talk about what it now looks like as followers of Christ to continue to pursue holiness and endure the life. And he talks about this, and he says that your justification is as easy as you allow it. It's your sanctification that is only as difficult as you make it. So kind of creating this idea and this understanding that we can make that moment of the Lord coming to us and saving us as difficult as we want to make it by creating so many barriers of entry, so many challenges, refusing him, running from him, doing all of these things to make it harder and harder for him to come to us. Doesn't mean he can't, and doesn't mean he won't time and time again, but we make that challenging. But in sanctification, in this process of pursuing him and pursuing a life of holiness, we can make that as difficult as we make it by adding on these weights, adding on these additional challenges, and removing ourselves from the desire to seek the perfecter and the joy that is set before us through all of that. He has modeled this for us. So we have this blueprint that we get to look at this morning in this passage as we move forward on what it looks like to run the race well. And the passage is very clear here this morning in guiding this and showing us what does it look like to run the race well? What does it look like to live a life pursuing him? Well, the first piece of that would be endurance. First piece of a race that is run well is through endurance. In verses 3 and 4, it says, "Consider him who endured from sinners such hostility against himself, so that you may not grow weary or faint-hearted. In your struggle against sin, you have not yet resisted to the point of shedding your blood." We see Christ being the ultimate example, literally resistance to the point of shedding blood in the life, death, and resurrection that he lived. And so his encouragement to us is that we cannot grow weary, we can't grow faint-hearted in this process, that this pursuance is a call and an encouragement and a command towards endurance, to keep taking those steps one after another, to keep that pursuit going. Keep in mind, if you were here last week, we talked about this passage called the Hall of Faith. And it's kind of this hall of heroes of the Old Testament that lived their lives in so many different ways that led towards faithfulness. Some of them doing remarkable things, some of them doing not unremarkable things. But even in those actions, the Lord was seeing it in the grand scheme, the grand tapestry, the grand plan of what God has laid out. And so we can kind of remind ourselves as we're reading and as we're seeing this blueprint of what a life of endurance looks like. This is coming off of the heels of so many of those grateful testimonies and stories and pieces of the past. It's why in this passage, the author talks about this great cloud of witnesses. He speaks to this idea that those of the past that led life after life, that have led us to where we are today, that great cloud of witnesses is there triumphantly celebrating and speaking towards the glory of God, speaking towards the life of endurance that they are so encouraging and hopeful for us to continue moving forward in. I ran cross country when I was in high school, and in those races, you have family that comes to support, but the unexciting thing about watching somebody run a race is you only get to see them once, maybe twice if the lap is repeated. But as a runner, it means you've got 80 to 90% of the race to hide away from family and go slow. And then you've got that 10% of the time to really give all of your effort. It's when people are watching, that's when the effort of the race kicks in and you're wanting to take those extra steps, push yourself a little bit harder. The race that we ran over and over again at our high school had this one notorious hill that was unbelievably steep to climb. And so it was just miserable every time. And it was one of those where you had to do it 3 times before the race was over. So you have to prepare the whole race for this one hill. Well, me and my friends, we would hide in the bushes and then come and push each other up the hill when we got to that part, helping each other, get past the worst part of it. And again, these are all silly illustrations, but it speaks towards the greater picture of what it looks like as the church to be pursuing that race well. We have this great cloud of witnesses. We have these heroes of the past that have lived life after life that are far more challenging than the lives that we have today, that have led towards the society, the world, the place, the church that we're in today, that are cheering us on, that are encouraging and pursuing and desiring for you to continue that race with endurance. In the meantime, when we hit those hard hills, when we hit the challenging, difficult places that we have to prepare for so long before we finally get to it, that's when the church comes together and we can help push each other up those spaces. We can help in that process of endurance. There's a passage in a champion, almost war cry in 2 Timothy chapter 2, verses 11, 12, and 13. And this is kind of what I picture, that great cloud of witnesses championing and celebrating and sharing to us as believers and as Christians in the world today. It says, if we have died in him, we also live in him. If we endure, we also reign in him. If we deny him, he also denies us. If we are faithless, he remains faithful, for he cannot deny himself. If we endure, we also reign in him. What a powerful statement and just encouragement and place that we have in this life is to know this great cloud of witnesses is pursuing and encouraging and championing this idea of us pursuing endurance, that endurance leads towards a reign with Christ one day. We sang in this hymn about the future and the future glory that is to come and what it'll look like when all the pain, when all the brokenness, when all the challenging pieces of endurance are ridded from us, when that weight is gone, when that sin is gone, and all that's left is the easy pieces of endurance, the coast, the final finale that it comes to of living with Christ. That's what it looks like to reign alongside him. And so what else does it look like to run a good race? Well, it looks like what we need is discipline. That in order to run the race well, what we need in our life is sometimes the hard pieces. We need discipline. Verses 5 through 11 speak to this idea of discipline. It says, and have you forgotten the exhortation that addresses you as my sons? My son, do not regard lightly the discipline of the Lord, nor be weary when reproved by him. For the Lord disciplines the one he loves and chastises every son whom he receives. It is for discipline that you have to endure. God is treating you as sons. For what son is there whom the Father does not discipline? If you are left without discipline, in which all have participated, then you are illegitimate children and not sons. Besides this, we have had earthly fathers who disciplined us, and we respected them. Shall we not much more be subject to the Father of spirits and live? For they disciplined us for a short time, as it seemed best to them, but he disciplined us for our good, that we may share in his holiness. For the moment, all discipline seems painful rather than pleasant, but later it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have trained by it. I mean, those are strong words towards discipline, but we can all look to and think of moments in our lives where discipline has led towards betterment. It's led towards, as frustrating, as difficult, as challenging as it is in the moment, to see the increased reward that comes on the other season of that, or comes from the knowledge that comes with that discipline, always is better in our lives when it comes from a place of love. But discipline we see in this passage is there to show us ultimately two things. The discipline that we see in life, the way we see it modeled or maybe not well modeled from a parent, and we see those moments on both sides of it. What we see in discipline is ultimately two things are true. The first is that discipline from God in this world is an assurance of your adoption. It's an assurance that God has saved you, that he is your father, that he has adopted you into his kingdom. As hard as discipline can be, as much as we don't want to sometimes accept or focus on the idea of God as needing to apprehend or needing to discipline or needing to lead towards a change of course or action, at the same time it's a reminder and it's a promise that God is there for you, that he is looking after you, that he has adopted you into his family, that discipline can and is a good thing when it's done from love. It's like when a kid cries out and rebels for attention. They just want to make sure oftentimes that you're still there. We can look after our daughter, 9 months old, and sit and play with her all day, and she'll be just the happiest you can be. But the second, for even just a few seconds you step away, even if it's to prepare a meal or get food for her or do something that is good and loving for the baby, she'll cry out immediately, every time. I mean, it's without fail. And it's this reminder that she just wants to make sure you're there. She just wants to make sure your face is right there in her face that you can see. And we're so much the same way when it comes to our relationship with God. Things are so good. They're so easy when he's right there, when you know he's involved in your life, when you know things are going good. But the second things start getting challenging, the second it's not exactly what you want and he's not right there in front of your face, we cry out. We lash out. We get frustrated in and of ourselves. It's innate in our being. But it's a constant reminder that God has adopted us, that he has protected us, that he has brought us into his kingdom. One of the scariest and just kind of eye-opening things for me in ministry in the area in which we live in was when I was at Hope Church over in Johns Creek. And very zealous, first starting the church, we'd emailed the county commissioner of Johns Creek and had sent out an email asking, hey, what are ways that our church can help the city in which we live in? We are here to serve the city, to be a part. And didn't get a response for a few days, so sent another reply, that kind of thing. And the only response I got from the city was a single statement that said, we have no needs at this time. That was it. We have no needs at this time. And it was just such a quick reminder to me that that's a scary place to be. That when we don't feel like we have need, that we don't feel like we have a need for change or a need for growth in our lives, that sometimes the worst place we can be in society is just really comfortable. That things are actually too easy to where we don't see a need for change or a need for growth in our system. It's a worry to me because when God is constantly working in my life, when he is changing me, when he is like hurting me for the better and growing me towards his likeness, it's a reminder that he's there. It's a reminder that he loves me, that he is protecting me, and that he wants the best for me. So my encouragement to you in life is to be weary of those moments where things are so comfortable that it doesn't feel like you need growth, that it doesn't feel like you need change. And that would be the other example here, is that the example of discipline is that it's an example of his love for our growth. It's always out of love that his discipline happens. If you talk to pretty much any new parent, they're going to tell you one of the worst days in parenthood is having to take your kids to go get their first shots. That any of those moments where you go and have to give your baby a shot, it's heartbreaking and it's miserable to see your kid have to sit there and take something that's going to be painful to them and cry out in those moments. It's hard. It's hard to sit there and watch. But it's a reminder in those moments that like we have to do things that hurt in order for the betterment of that child. That sometimes things have to happen, regardless of what it is, to see betterment come from that. I dread the day when I have to start actually disciplining my daughter. She's too young for that relationship to be what it is. But I don't look forward to those days. It's actually like, I really don't look forward to those days. I actually really am ready for those not to come. And so in life right now, it's so much easier to just extend unrequited love to the child and understand, oh, she's a baby, she doesn't know better, she can cry, it's okay, I can pass it off. But there comes a time when discipline has to be incorporated into that relationship. And I do not look forward to those days. But I didn't become a parent just for the fun days. God didn't create humanity just for the fun days. He created them knowing the challenges that were going to come forth. Before time had ever existed, before humans had ever existed, before everything that is this world that we know it to be, he knew challenges were going to come, but he knew out of love it was worth it. And out of love, all of that endurance was there. It's a reminder that he loves us when we see discipline happen. Deuteronomy 8:16 is kind of the reference point that he's making here. It says, "Know then in your heart that as a man disciplines his son, the Lord your God disciplines you." And we've probably all seen examples on both sides of the story. I don't know what your relationship with your parents were like. I know that many in the room have been fortunate to have good relationships there and seen a model of discipline that was healthy. But then we've also seen moments where discipline was given out of selfishness, or is given out of their own anger and frustration, and it's not good. And it messes up, and it muddies, and it makes the idea and the understanding of discipline all that more challenging. And it makes it where there's almost this temptation to come up here and either ignore discipline or try to lessen what that looks like, because we've seen the world take it to such horrible and awful broken extremes. But the reality is, and the reminder here, is that God's discipline is coming from a place of love. It has to. Because God is perfect, it means his discipline is perfect. Matt Chandler has this beautiful phrase where he says, God is more for your good than you are. And so it's a reminder in those moments of discipline, as challenging, as difficult as they are, God is more for your good than you are. And so we can see the short-sighted picture of what we think good might look like. But if we were to ever step out of that bubble just for a second, we would know and trust and believe. And we see this time and time again in every story where we get to see kind of the ending picture. Hebrews chapter 11 is story after story where we get to see a bigger picture and a bigger scope through the endurance and the discipline of this life of different heroes. We get this greater idea of what's to come. We're to remember that this whole section of Scripture that the author is speaking towards is an analogy of a race. And within this analogy, it's clear to me that discipline is one of the major components to a better outcome. It's discipline that we give towards ourselves to better ourselves and see greater results come from it. My wife, she works in kind of the medical field, and so I get all the nerdy conversations about muscles and the way the body works all the time that I get to hear about. But like one of the beauties of the way muscle grows is it's beaten and it's torn and it's like hurt and attacked in order for it to ever grow bigger and stronger. And so the way we see a result in muscle, the way we see a result in endurance or cardio or any of those things is coming from a place of actually attacking the body and allowing it time to rest. And so even the physical idea of this race that leads towards endurance, the better we allow that to happen, the more we embrace those disciplined moments, those challenging spaces, the removal of those weights, the better results we'll see in that path. Which leads us to the next piece here, which is how else do we run a race well? Well, we run it through perseverance. That it doesn't just take endurance, it doesn't just take discipline, but it takes perseverance. It takes doing this time after time after time in order to see a good and glorifying result. In verses 12 through 17, it says, "Therefore lift your drooping hands and strengthen your weak knees and make straight paths for your feet, so that what is lame may not be put out of joint, but rather be healed. Strive for peace with everyone and for the holiness without which no one will see the Lord. See to it that no one fails to obtain the grace of God, that no root of bitterness springs up and causes trouble, and by it many become defiled. that no one is sexually immoral or unholy like Esau, who sold his birthright for a single meal. For you know that afterward, when he desired to inherit that blessing, he was rejected, for he found no chance to repent, though he sought it with tears. Church, the encouragement here in perseverance is, church, let's make straight paths. Let's make straight paths as a church. It's so easy to overcomplicate things. It's so easy to muddy up what our life needs to look like, to get confused by the direction that we need to go. What's the next step for us? What's the next piece of the plan? As a church, it's why I just want to pursue being a simple church and doing that really well. It's where Chandler shared, like, our discipleship process is 3 simple things. It's that we want to know God, we want to believe God, and we want to obey him with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength. That's it. That's what we're called to do. The second we add all of these different extra routes and different curves and challenges and barriers of entry to that process, we muddy up what God is encouraging us to do, which is just make our paths straight. Look towards his holiness and pursue it with all our heart. To run with endurance and persevere when the moments are hard, when our hands are weak, when we're droopy, like the verse says, when our knees are hurt and sore, to pick up our pieces, to be healed by the renewal of who God is, and to pursue him, making our paths straight. This passage kind of gives 4 of those different ways in which we can make it difficult for ourselves, in which we can make this path kind of windy and curvy and add all of these additional steps that aren't necessary for us to take. One of those is it says that we have to pursue peace. That's both individual in our lives. I mean, it goes even further to say, pursue peace with everyone, and for the holiness without which no one will see the Lord. Going as far as to say that the peace that the God is commanding you to give with everyone is one of those barriers that you're putting in order to allow them to see the Lord in a better light. It's not easy to do. It's actually really hard to do, to pursue peace with everyone. It's why this was something shared thousands of years ago that still beats so prevalently today, is because we are called to pursue peace individually and corporately as a church. One of the biggest warning signs, one of the biggest concerns that we're taught in church planting is to be concerned and to be careful about discourse within the church. That it's so easy. Everyone's seen it. Everyone's been to a church because they're messy, they're broken, they're not perfect. There is no perfect church. We will have those moments, and we're going to have those places where discord happens. But what my prayer is and what my encouragement is, we remind ourselves that we're just making the paths more difficult when we do that. That we're called to pursue peace with everyone, no matter the circumstances, pursuing peace. The next piece is it says to uproot bitterness, kind of on the opposite end of that spectrum, where peace is something we're called to give outwardly. Bitterness is something that can uproot itself inwardly so strong. And I'll be the first one to tell you that I've allowed bitterness in my past to be something that has shielded my eyes from the Lord in such gross and despicable ways. In those moments where we let bitterness manifest, we're just making our paths so much more difficult for ourselves. We're going further and further away and having to come just as far back in order to see the path that's set before us, to pursue the straight path that God has given us. The second we could just give that up to him, the path is straight again. It's really that simple. But yet we want to hold on to these things for so long. And some of us have real good reason. I mean, if we're truly honest about it, the world is messy. It's broken. It's not fair. And so you're going to have things that happen in life that cause real bitterness, and bitterness that's continual. We have relationships that are unfortunately there so long that there's no way to almost see that end in sight of bitterness. But what God is saying is that his love for you is far better than the bitterness that you're holding on to now. It's not worth it. Pursue straight paths. And then we get towards a command to flee sexual immorality. It's always fascinating to me to see the things that an author decides to share to an audience. And to know that, like, if he had 30 seconds to share 4 things with them on what a straight path looks like, his 4 things that he shares is pursue peace, to uproot bitterness, to flee sexual immorality, and to remove irreverent moments like Esau that we'll get to in a moment. But it shows so clearly how strong something like sexual immorality can hold onto our lives. It's oftentimes so secretive, it's oftentimes so addictive, and it's so strong that it keeps that path wanting to be so windy. It doesn't mean God's not there. It doesn't mean that he's not there guiding you and pursuing you and championing you with a whole cloud of witnesses that are there wanting you to pursue that straight path. But it's a warning that those moments in your life, if they are not given up, if they're not talked about, if they're not confessed and they're not shared along with other believers, those moments can create really, really difficult and challenging moments in your lives. And then lastly, what we see is this straight path is a removal of irreverence. It talks about right on the flip side of the sexual impurity, this idea of Esau in the giving up of his birthright. In the story of Esau, kind of in his laziness of this moment where he is hungry and he just wants temporary pleasure in his life, right there, right then he wants this meal, that he's willing to trade his entire birthright as the older son to his younger son in order to fill himself for one single meal. A single meal is all he gave up. Every future blessing that could have come for generation after generation, and he gave it up for one single meal. Society, like we continue to seek and fill ourselves all the time with things that are in the immediate. The moments that can just fill us, that remove ourselves from the opportunity of future glory that could come. We talked about discipline and the idea of discipline towards ourselves and what that looks like. But so often it's easy for us to just want to seek what can fill us today, the meal that we can have today that removes ourselves from the future glory that could come. We do this in our careers. We do it in life. We do it in our marriages where we just want to skirt the issue and just try to get to the conclusion fast or try to make things happier quicker in order to not worry about those rooted things that are there, making that path winding, making things challenging. We do this with our kids where we say, we threaten them and we say, well, you can't have this if you do this, but then we don't actually follow through with those actions. And we have so many of these moments where we give up what could be good in the future for something singular in the moment. We constantly fill ourselves in life with any type of entertainment or dopamine hit that can just fill us over and over again instead of working on ourselves towards a future and making those paths straight. Those are the things that he is warning us of. Pursuing peace, uprooting bitterness, fleeing sexual immorality, and not focusing so much on the immediate for giving up what could be in the future. John Owen has this great illustration about fruit-bearing trees and how a tree that bears fruit, when a storm comes that's really strong, what happens is that storm will blow against the tree, will cause a lot of disruption and discomfort, and it starts to dissipate the soil around the roots. And so it actually starts to free up more pockets and more spaces for the roots of the tree to dig down deeper because that soil is now loosened. And so when the roots start to dig deeper, what happens is they now have a stronger base below the tree, but it also has new nutrients. It's got new places in which it's able to receive nutrients. And it's not till years later when you start to see the result of that storm, where it's not till years later where that fruit starts to be stronger, healthier, the tree bears more fruit. And our lives are so similar to those trees. We have these moments where storms come and they blow and they're rocky and they hurt and they're challenging and difficult. But what we see happen is when we endure those, when we persevere through those storms, our roots are stronger. We have new nutrients. We have found ways in which we see the Lord that are brighter and better and more illuminated than they ever were before. Our lives get to be greater as a result of this moment. One of the strongest and biggest and honestly heart-wrenching examples in all of Scripture of this is somebody like Job. We have this great reminder in the Old Testament of a character like Job. Unironically, Job is one of my favorite books in the whole Bible. It's probably one of the ones I've read the most and returned to the most because I find his story and his testimony to be so powerful. I hope to preach through it one day. But he's a perfect example of somebody who knows, believes, and obeys in such relentlessly powerful ways, even when everything doesn't make sense, even when everything is taken from him. He's a man who's kind of the physical manifestation of what we're talking about. He's a man who loved. It says that he loved and he served the Lord. And that Satan tried to claim to God that it was based on his piety, that it was based on the actions and the lifestyle that he had. That's why he loved the Lord. And if those actions were taken away from him, or if his lifestyle was taken from him, he wouldn't have the relationship with God that he had previously. And so God allows Job to lose everything as proof that his love of God was not in his things or his actions or the way of life that he had. It says that he toils over this. He even rips his clothes. He cries out. He begs for death in his own life. But all of this, every single time, he's doing this while still saying, but Lord, I'll still praise you. I don't understand any of this. I can't fathom it. It doesn't make sense. I wish my life wasn't even here. It's so relentlessly. But regardless, I will still pursue you. Job's friends, they try to come and console him, and ultimately what they say is they start telling him, well, it must have been because of your sin that this happened. It must have been because of something bad that you did in your past that you're now having this as repercussions. And God is quick to remind us through these friends that we can't know that. But that's not a promise. That's not a guarantee. That we can't look at our lives and think, oh, because of my actions, this is now what's happened. We know the Lord disciplines, but we also know the Lord loves and he comforts. But we know that he works in mysterious ways in order to pursue a life towards him. And so if you have heard something like this, like these friends in the past, like my thing to you is I'm sorry. Like I'm genuinely sorry if people have tried to put God into a situation where his discipline looked less like love and more like hate, or more like strength, or more like anger or frustration. Those moments are really real, and the more I'm with believers, the more I'm with people, the more I realize we can often have a misguided view of what this race looks like and how God works. Yes, he disciplines, but always from a point of love. What Job's friends had so wrong in the story is they were not understanding the bigger picture of God's love in the situation. They couldn't have. They couldn't have known that everything being taken from him would ultimately lead towards future glory with God. They couldn't have known that his story would now be a picture for generations of believers to see and to be modeled after and to know what it looks like to have everything in our lives taken from us, but still see somebody pursue the Lord. We all have friends that have gone through situations where we say, man, I don't understand. I can't understand how this is possible or why God would work in this way, but all I know is I still see them pursue him, and that's incredible. That's what it looks like to make straight paths, to not focus on the here, not focus on the now, not focus on ourselves, but to continue running the race. And so the final piece that we have here this morning is what else does it look like to run a race well? Well, it looks like enduring some more. It's not just endurance once. It's not just perseverance. It's not just discipline, but it's continual endurance. And he wraps this up at the end by reminding of this again. It says in verse 18, "For you have not come to what you may be touched, a blazing fire and a darkness and gloom and a tempest, and the sound of a trumpet and a voice whose words made the hearers beg that no further message be spoken to them. For they could not endure the order that was given. If even a beast touches the mountain, it shall be stoned. Indeed, so terrifying was the sight that Moses said, I tremble with fear. But you have come to Mount Zion, and to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, and to innumerable angels in festival gatherings, and to the assembly of the firstborn who are enrolled in heaven, and to God, the judge of all, and to the Spirit of the righteous made perfect, and to Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant, and to the sprinkled blood that speaks a better word than the blood of Abel. See that you do not refuse him who is speaking. For if they did not escape when they refused him who warned them on earth, much less will we escape if we reject him who warns from heaven. At the time his voice shook the earth, but now he has promised, yet once more I will shake not only the earth, but also the heavens. This phrase, yet once more, indicates the removal of things that are shaken. That is, things that have been made in order that the things that cannot be shaken may remain. Therefore, let us be grateful for receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken. And thus let us offer to God acceptable worship with reverence and awe, for our God is a consuming fire. This passage has 8 of these but you have come phrases. I have a list here for you of all 8 of these. It says, but you have come. And these are encouragements. These are like final reminders that the author has. As you remember, this is kind of wrapping up the end of the speech that he has been giving, that we've been spending like 6 months on, the single speech that the author has been giving. And what he says is this reminder that you've come so far. If we look back at the path from the moment in the garden where we fell and the world became what it was, we endured slavery, we endured so many of these moments. We endured Israel having to be removed from the situation of kingdoms that they were in. We had to go through lifetimes of wilderness, of struggling, not knowing what was to come. We had these future promises of a promised land that one day came. We were given law. We were given all of these moments in which God was there. And these are what he's saying. He said, we gave you Mount Zion, and you endured Mount Zion. We had the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem to look forward to. We had innumerable angels and festival gatherings. There was an assembly of the firstborn of Jesus, that God was the judge of all, that the spirits of the righteousness were made perfect. This is that picture that we see at the beginning where he talks about this great cloud of witnesses, that so many saints, so many believers, so many people have lived incredible lives to lead us to where we are today. It's the reminder that we have of this church, where we're in a place that's lasted 189 years. I'll continue to say this because it's amazing. That's because of endurance. It's because of perseverance. It's because of a church faithfully continuing that process. They didn't do it perfectly. We're not doing it perfectly. But they continued on the path that was set before him, and we are a result of those moments of future glory. Let's run this race. Let's make straight paths. Let's endure the race that's been set before us, because we have so many great examples to look for behind us. I have a quote from a guy named David McIntyre that speaks to this idea of Jerusalem. It says, "To what profit is it that we dwell in Jerusalem if we do not see the king's face? And when he comes forth from his royal chambers, accompanied with blessing, are we to hold ourselves at leisure that we may yield him worship and offer him service?" If we look through the course of biblical history, what we see is constant struggle after struggle as God continues to redeem his children. We are a result of the legacy of endurance, discipline, and perseverance, and more endurance, leading to these incredible gifts of an incredible life. So how do we run this race well? We run this race well with these final two verses here. It says, "Therefore, let us be grateful for receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, and thus let us offer to God acceptable worship with reverence and awe, for our God is a consuming fire." You have homework today as we leave church this morning. You get two options. You can spend the next 2 hours and 5 minutes today reading through the book of Job. It's roughly what it would take. Or you could spend it watching the movie Chariots of Fire. It's your choice. You can do one or the other. I'll leave it up to you and your family to decide which is the better option. I don't know if you've seen the movie Chariots of Fire, but it's a movie from the 1980s about two racers. You've got a runner who is of Jewish background, and you've got this Christian runner who is a missionary in China. And what you see through the course of the story, I'm not going to spoil the movie for you because I want you to go watch it, but what you'll see through the course of this movie is one person that, despite of their religion, is trying to prove what society has said about them wrong. So he's racing with all of this weight, with all of this burden, with so much carried on who he is as a person. And so he is fighting this Jewish guilt and background and the way the world is viewing him. And then you have this Christian runner who says, "I have no weight because Christ has taken it from me." And so you'll watch as two paths lead towards an exciting conclusion towards the end of the movie, but what you'll see is one that is making his path straight and one that is getting so caught up in all the curves, all of the challenges, all the difficulties that we want to put on ourselves. It doesn't mean both can't reach a finish line. It doesn't mean that both can't get there, but one, God is calling, is a straight path. He is saying, as a church, let's make straight paths. Quote from the guy Eric Liddell, who is the runner in this movie. He says, "If you commit yourself to the love of Christ, then that is how you run a straight race." That's it. It's that simple. Church, let's endure, let's persevere, let's discipline ourselves in ways that reach future glory. But at the end of the day, let's just commit ourselves to the love of Christ. Let's run a straight race together. Let's run it individually in our homes and your families, and let's run it together as a church this morning. So as we join into this moment of communion, that's what it is to focus on this morning. Focus on God our Father, who is our discipliner, but he's also our loving Father. He's the one that has created the path that we're to run. He's already got it all figured out. We're just here to make it to the end and to finish well and to pursue every day with the love of who Christ is. So if you will, take the cup that's in front of you as we'll take this moment of communion together. Matthew 26, verses 26 through 28 says, "Now as they were eating, Jesus took the bread, and after blessing it, he broke it, and he gave it to his disciples. And he said, 'Take, eat, for this is my body.'" Church, let's take. And he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink of it, all of you, for this is the blood of my covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. God, as your word says, we're so grateful to receive a kingdom that is not shaken, Lord. That your kingdom, as it continues to grow, that the kingdom of heaven that is perfect, that is far different from the world in which we live in here, Lord, that is a place that I can't wait to go. It's a place that I can't wait to see with the majesty and the glory and the ways in which you've shown this world, Lord, in so many different ways. God, it says to offer acceptable worship and to give you reverence and awe. And God, we are here this morning as a church to do those very things. To worship who you are, to praise your name, to sing of the glory of the way in which you've transformed our lives, Lord. To take every day with reverence and awe of the way in which you've given us a life that is worth living. You've given us family and a world and beautiful creation and so many things that are constant reminders, Lord, of the ways in which you continue to work in this world. God, we thank you for letting us be a part and a piece and a thread in the tapestry and the story that you have created, Lord. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.